The power goes out on a Thursday night. By Saturday, the food in your refrigerator has spoiled. You drive to the store. The shelves are stripped bare. The trucks did not come. So you count what is left in your house. 3 days of food, maybe 4, and you have no idea how to make more. You were never taught. Your great-grandmother lived through 4 years of locked shelves and rationed food. She never went hungry once. She knew 30 things you do not. 30 methods the war forced her to learn. 30 methods the easy years that followed let you forget. In the 1940s, every household in America became a small factory. The government stamped the butter. It stamped the coffee, the shoes, the gasoline, the meat. It told a family exactly how much it was allowed. Then it asked for their fat, their tin, their rubber on top. A family had 2 choices: go without or make their own quietly around the rule. They chose to make their own. They grew it, canned it, cured it, stretched it, mended it. They did it for pennies. They did it with their own 2 hands. That knowledge did not die because it failed. It worked better than anything that came after. It was buried by the flood of cheap goods that came once the war was won, whispering, you would never need it again. Number 22 put an edge back on a razor blade the government would not let you replace. Number 11 kept a winter of eggs fresh on a shelf with no cold and no power for pennies. And number 2, the patch of dirt that fed 20 million families when the shelves ran bare, sits unused under your window right now. These 30 methods were never about saving money. They were about never standing helpless when the supply ran dry. Some of them broke the rationing laws of their day. All of them were buried by the comfort that came after. Hit subscribe. Let us count down the 30 wartime methods that could carry your family through the next crisis, the ones they hoped you would never have to learn again. Number 30, coloring your own margarine. Butter went on the ration. Margarine took its place. But the dairy states made it a crime to sell it colored yellow. So it came white, like lard. It came with a small packet of orange dye. You dropped the dye into the soft margarine. You worked it through with a wooden spoon. You stirred until the color ran even, with no pale streaks left. Knead it warm, not cold. Cold margarine fights the dye and leaves you marbling. The law kept the color out of the store. It never kept it out of your kitchen. Not a product they sold you. A quiet defiance at the supper table. Number 29. Stretching a half-pound of butter into a full pound. The butter ration ran thin. So you made it last. You softened a half-pound in a bowl. You stirred a teaspoon of plain gelatin into a half-cup of warm milk. You let it cool to a soft set. Then you whipped the 2 together. You whipped until the milk vanished into the fat. Whip it slow and cold. Warm it, and the milk weeps back out within the hour. It spread like butter. It cooked like butter. 1 week's ration became 2, not less butter. More mornings. Number 28, saving every drop of bacon grease. You kept a tin by the stove. Meat hit the pan. You poured the hot fat through a square of cloth into the tin. You fried with it. You seasoned greens with it. You greased the bread pan with it. The government wanted that fat turned in. It pulled glycerin from kitchen grease to make explosives. So every spoon you kept back was a spoon kept from the war. Strain it warm before it sets. Let it harden first, and the cloth clogs and you lose half. Not waste. A second pantry by the stove. Number 27. Stretching coffee with roasted chicory. Coffee went on the ration in 1942. 1 pound every 5 weeks for a grown adult. So you stretched it. You dug chicory root. You dried it. You roasted it dark in a dry skillet until it smelled of burnt earth. You ground it. You mixed 1 part chicory to 3 parts coffee. Roast it past brown, near to black. Stop short and the cup turns bitter and thin. 1 tin lasted twice as long. The chicory cost you nothing but an afternoon. Not a weaker cup, a longer supply. Number 26, turning a worn shirt collar. A shirt wore through at the collar fold first. The body of it still had years left. So you did not retire it. You unpicked the collar with a seam ripper. You lifted it free. You turned it end for end, the frayed edge tucked under. The sound edge stood up. Then you stitched it back down. Press the new fold flat with a hot iron before you sew. It lies clean, and no one reads it as a repair. A new shirt was scarce and stamped. Not a new shirt. The old one turned.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us who still believe a man should be able to fix his own home. It's the forgotten handyman secrets, the old-fashioned repair tricks our grandfathers used to fix anything around the house and keep it running for life. But these skills are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't pay a repairman ever again. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
Number 25, darning a sock instead of throwing it out. A hole in the heel did not end a sock. You slipped a darning egg inside. A smooth stone worked just as well. It held the shape. You laid a grid of thread across the hole one way. You wove the needle over and under the other way. The gap filled in like new cloth. Pull the weave tight at the edges. Leave it loose where old wool meets new, and the darn lets go by the second wash. Wool went to uniforms. You mended what you had, not a new pair, a saved one. Number 24, sewing with feed and flour sacks. The mills knew what farm wives were doing, so they printed the sacks in floured cotton. You soaked the sack to lift the brand ink. You unpicked the seam. You washed and pressed the cloth. You cut your pattern from it. Save the string that closed the sack. It pulls out in one long thread and hems a dress by hand. 3 sacks made a child's dress. Cloth was rationed and dear. The sack was free and already in the kitchen. Not scraps. A bolt of cloth in disguise. Number 23, resoling a worn shoe at home. Shoes went on the ration in 1943, 3 pairs a year, then 2. So you made them last. The sole wore through. You cut a new one from scrap leather or an old belt. You roughed both faces with a file. You spread leather cement. You clamped it overnight under a stack of books. Skive the edge of the patch thin. It feathers into the old sole and will not catch and peel. A few cents of leather. Another year on a child's only shoes. The stamp limited the store. It never limited your hands. Number 22, putting an edge back on a used razor blade. Steel was rationed. Blades were scarce. So you stopped throwing them out. You ran the wet blade around the inside of a drinking glass, flat against the curve. 20 strokes on each edge. You polished the fine wire back to a point. Keep the blade flat to the glass. Lift the spine and you round the edge off instead of honing it. 1 blade meant for a week gave you a month. It was never dull. It was only tired. Not a blade you replaced. A blade you brought back. Number 21, making soap from saved kitchen fat. Soap grew scarce on the shelf. So you made your own. You saved fat trimmings until you had a few pounds. You dissolved lye in cold water. Always lye into water. Never water into lye, or it boils up and burns you. You let both cool to just warm. You poured the lye into the melted fat. You stirred until it pulled thick, like honey. You poured it into a lined box. You cut bars the next day. Cure them a full month before you use them. Cut too soon and the raw lye bites the skin. A nickel of lye. Free fat. A year of soap. Not bought. Rendered. Stop a moment. Look at what those first 10 methods share. Every one was a way around a rule. The ration book set the limit. The family quietly moved it. Hoarding was a crime. Buying off the books was a crime. By 1943, the black market in meat, gas, and stamps ran past $1 billion a year. Tens of millions of ordinary people broke the rule to feed their children. They were not criminals. They were households doing what households have always done. Then the war ended. The rules lifted. And the trade that grew up after sold them one idea, hard, for 50 years. The idea that your own hands are not qualified to provide for your own home. The knowledge was not lost. It was suppressed. Suppressed one full shelf at a time, because a family that makes its own is not a customer. It is a threat. Number 20. Mending a frayed lamp cord. No new appliances were made during the war. The factories built tanks and radios instead, so a frayed cord did not get replaced. It got fixed. You unplugged it. You cut out the bad length. You stripped a ½ inch of each wire. You twisted like color to like color. You wrapped each splice tight and separate with rubber tape. No two bare wires could touch. Stagger the two splices 1 inch apart. Then, if the tape slips, the wires still cannot meet. A working lamp was not for sale at any price. Not replaced. Repaired. Number 19. Re-wicking an oil lamp for the dark. The power failed, or the blackout fell. So the oil lamp came down off the shelf. You fed a fresh cotton wick up through the burner. You trimmed the top dead flat with scissors. You turned it just high enough to light without smoking. Trim the wick flat, never to a point. A peak throws a tongue of flame that blacks the chimney in minutes. Filled and trimmed, one lamp lit a kitchen all night, for pennies of oil. The grid could go down. The lamp did not care, not dependent on a wire, lit by your own hand. Number 18. Blacking out a room against the night. The blackout was the law. One lit window drew a fine, or worse, a bomber's eye. So you sealed the light in. You cut a wooden frame to fit the window. You tacked heavy, dark cloth or tar paper over it. You set it tight in the casing after dark. No thread of light escaped the edges. Check it from the street, not the room. Light leaks at the corners, where you cannot see it from inside. The same trick holds heat in a power cut today, not just hiding the light, holding the warmth. Number 17. Brewing your own cleaning supplies. Store cleaners thinned out on the shelf, so you mixed your own. Vinegar cut grease and shined glass. Baking soda scoured a pot without a scratch. Washing soda in hot water stripped a greasy floor. Keep the washing soda off bare aluminum. It eats the finish and leaves it dull. A few cents of 3 plain powders did the work of a shelf of bottles. The store could run dry. Your pantry did not. Not a cabinet of brand names, a handful of plain chemistry. Number 16. Making vinegar from apple scraps. The bottle ran out, so you grew more. You covered apple peels and cores with water. You stirred in a spoon of sugar. You left the jar under a cloth, in a warm corner. In a few weeks, it soured to cider. In a few more, to sharp vinegar. Cover it with cloth, not a lid. The brew needs AER to turn. Seal it tight, and it traps and molds. Free scraps became a jar of vinegar, for pickling, for cleaning, for dressing. Not garbage. the start of the next batch. Number 15. Stretching a pound of meat into 2 meals. Meat went on the ration in 1943. A single pound had to feed the family, so you stretched it. You soaked stale bread or rolled oats in milk. You worked it into the ground meat by hand. You made a loaf that ate like twice the meat. Keep it to 1/3 bread by weight. More than that, and it falls apart and tastes of paste. The oats vanished into the gravy. No child at the table knew the difference. 1 pound fed 6, not less on the plate. More mouths from the same ration. Number 14. Keeping hens for your own eggs. Eggs were scarce and dear. A few backyard hens fed themselves on scraps. They paid you back in protein, 3 or 4 hens in a small coop. They turned peelings and weeds into an egg apiece most mornings. Give them grit. A dish of crushed shell or coarse sand. Without it, the shells come thin and break in your hand. A laying flock ran on what you would have thrown away. The store could empty. The coop laid on. Not eggs you bought, eggs you raised. Number 13. Raising rabbits for the table. The government urged it outright. Raise rabbits for meat. They breed fast. They eat greens and scraps. They need no pasture at all. A hutch off the ground. A buck and 2 does. A family had meat all year without a single ration stamp. Keep the hutch dry with a wire floor. The droppings fall through and the animals stay clean. Not waiting in a butcher's line. Meat raised in your own yard. Number 12. Keeping bees for sugar's sake. Sugar was the first thing rationed. It was nearly the last thing freed. The whole war ran on it. So you kept bees and let them make your sweetener. 1 hive in a quiet corner. Pounds of honey a year, free of any stamp. Leave the bees enough honey to winter on. Strip the hive bare in the fall and you starve them by spring. Honey sweetened and baked where sugar was forbidden. Not begging the ration board. Making your own. Number 11. Keeping eggs fresh through winter with no cold. In spring, the hens laid more than you could eat. In winter, they stopped. So you saved the surplus. You stirred water glass into cooled boiled water. Sodium silicate, a few cents a tin. You lowered clean, unwashed eggs into the crock. The liquid covered them over. The solution sealed each shell. The eggs kept for months in a cool corner. Use only unwashed eggs. The natural bloom is half the seal. Wash it off and the egg spoils. A crock filled in October fed you in February. Not eggs from a shelf. Eggs put by. There is a woman near Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Past 90 now. She still keeps a root cellar under her kitchen. A crock of eggs in water glass through the winter. She learned all of it as a girl during the war, at her mother's elbow. Her mother had learned it in the lean years before. No one asked her to pass it down. Her great-grandchildren order their groceries to the door from a telephone. They have never seen a hen lay or a jar seal. When she goes, the recipes will sit in a box in a drawer. The doing of it will not. The doing of it lives only in the hands, and only while the hands still move. Today, the average home keeps less than a week of food in it. The shelves refill on trucks every 3 days. That is not abundance. That is a thread. We did not lose the skill because it failed. We lost it because the shelves stayed full long enough to make us forget they could ever go bare. Number 10. Pressure canning the low-acid harvest. Beans, corn, peas, meat. They had to be canned under pressure. Skip it, and they can carry a poison. One you cannot see or smell or taste. You packed clean jars. You set them in the pressure canner. You held the full pressure for the full time the chart called for. never less. Watch the gauge, hold the pressure steady, let it swing and the seal fails. A loaded shelf of jars was a winter's food locked safe. Not food in a freezer that dies with the power. Food sealed in glass that keeps on a shelf. Number 9. Water bath canning the fruit and tomatoes. The high-acid crops needed no pressure. Tomatoes, berries, peaches, pickles, only a long boil. You filled hot jars. You capped them. You lowered them into a deep pot of boiling water. You held them the time the fruit called for. The lids sucked down with a sound like a tap. Press the center of each cooled lid. If it springs back, it never sealed. That jar goes in the icebox to eat now. A summer of fruit kept a full year, not eaten fresh and gone, caught at the peak and held. Number 8. Curing pork with nothing but salt. Before the freezer, salt kept the meat. You rubbed the fresh pork hard all over with salt. A little sugar and saltpeter sometimes. You packed it down. You let it cure cold, days to the pound, before you hung it. Keep it near freezing while it cures. Warm it and the meat spoils before the salt reaches the center. Cured right, a ham hung in the smokehouse a full year. It never once saw ice. Not meat that needs a machine. Meat the salt keeps for you. Number 7. Smoking meat to hold it through the year. After the salt, the smoke finished the work. You hung the meat in a small closed shed. You kept a low, cool, smoldering hardwood fire under it for days on end, until the smoke worked all the way through. Keep the fire cool and smoking, never hot and flaming. Heat cooks the meat and ruins the keep. You want smoke, not a roast. Smoked and hung, the meat kept for months in open air, not preserved by a wire and a compressor. Preserved by salt, smoke, and patience. Number 6. Drying the garden for the lean months. What you could not can, you dried. You sliced apples, beans, and tomatoes thin. You spread them out on screens. You set them in the sun or a warm attic. You waited until they were leathery, with no moisture left to rot. Dry them until they crack, not bend. Any softness left in them is water, and water is what spoils the lot. Dried and stored in tins, a summer's surplus kept a year. It weighed almost nothing at all. Not food that fills a cellar. Food you could carry out the door in a sack. Number 5. Cellaring the root crops in sand. The hardy vegetables kept themselves. Given a cool, dark corner, you layered carrots, beets, and turnips in boxes of damp sand. You set the potatoes in the dark. You hung the cabbages by the root, all where the cold could reach them, but the frost could not. Keep them just above freezing and out of the light. Warmer and the potatoes sprout, lit and the roots go soft. A well-packed cellar fed a family fresh vegetables in February, with no canning at all, not bought week by week, stored once and drawn on all winter. Number 4. Keeping food cold with no ice and no power. Before the icebox was filled, the ground did the work. You sank a screened box down in the spring, or you nested a clay pot inside a larger pot. You packed wet sand in the space between them. You stood it in the shade, where a breeze could reach it. Keep the sand wet and the air moving. The cooling comes from the water drying off. Still air kills it dead. That cooler held milk sweet through a hot day. With no machine at all, not cold that fails when the grid does, cold that costs nothing but water. Number 3. Storing and clearing water for when the tap stops. A family that cannot draw water cannot last a week. So you kept it ahead. You filled clean jugs and crocks. You stored them cool and dark. And you knew how to make doubtful water safe. A hard, rolling boil. 1 full minute. It kills what is living in it. Rotate the stored water every season. Then it never goes flat and stale in the jug. Days of water in the cellar was the line between staying home and standing in a line. Not water you assume will run. Water you set by before it stopped. Number 2. Working a victory garden that fed the family. By 1944, 20 million victory gardens grew nearly half the fresh vegetables in America. You turned over a patch of yard. You fed it with compost and wood ash. You planted what your family ate most: beans, greens, squash, tomatoes, potatoes. Plant in succession, a little every few weeks, not all at once. Then the harvest comes steady instead of all in one glut. A small garden, well worked, fed a family through the summer. And it filled the cellar for the winter. Not food trucked in 1,000 miles. Food grown 10 steps from the door. Number 1. Looking at the empty shelf yourself before you ever reach for the phone. That is the whole list. Every method, from 30 down to 2, began the same way. A woman, or just as often a man, faced an empty shelf or a locked ration. They did not panic. They did not wait. They turned to what they had: a patch of dirt, a crock, a needle, a tin of fat. And they made enough. Most of the time, enough was already within reach. A handful of seed, a little salt, a skill learned once at someone's elbow and never forgotten. The doing of it asked one thing no store can ship to your door: the settled certainty that your family's survival rests in your own 2 hands, not in a truck that may or may not come. Your great-grandparents carried that certainty as their ordinary state of mind, not because they were brave, because they had fed themselves through a war with their own 2 hands, and the doing of it had made them sure. That certainty cannot be bought at any price. It can only be built. Start with 1 jar. Start with 1 row of beans. Start. None of these 30 methods needed a license. None of them needed a factory or another man's permission. They needed one thing only: someone who refused to be helpless when the shelves ran thin, someone who saw the butter run low and stretched it, who heard the grid go dark and lit the lamp, who watched the trucks slow and turned the backyard into a farm. That refusal was the whole inheritance of the home front, not the rationing, not the fear. The quiet certainty that a family could feed and clothe and warm itself from what lay within arm's reach. We did not lose the tools. The canning pot is still in the basement. The garden is still under the grass. We lost the voice beside us that once said, "Watch me do this one time, and you will know it for the rest of your life." That voice is what these 30 methods were. Not chores from a harder time. A language of survival the comfortable years hoped you would forget. The shelves will not always be full. Your hands can be ready before they empty.